Hello everyone, we are back with chapter 18 of The Treasure Hunter's Tale. Our little newly established family had settled into life at home quickly. Miss Poor in Spirit busied herself with her mission, and Miss Beloved of the King did what she could, but had to be careful, as she was very weak, having been fairly undernourished for the duration of her imprisonment, and her nerves had taken quite a beating. And so, although she longed to get back out there to interact with the crowds, she had to suffice herself with short visits from individuals who she shared her faith with. Little Freddie, on the other hand, had bounced back fairly quickly and was already wanting to run about and play as well as help with the mission. It so happened one morning he had been particularly boisterous, and Miss Beloved of the King had sent him out for some fresh air. She had packed him a small picnic with enough to share with his friends, and had said that he could go out into the fields to get some sunshine. Freddie had a lovely morning. He was somewhat of an important person among the other children, as having related his past in such a manner as to convince them that he had been aboard a pirate ship and had made a daring escape. This wasn't really lying either. As to Freddie, the louty ruffians who had been his captors were pirates in every sense of the word. The boys would ask him about the adventures, and the girls wanted to hear about the time he met his darling mother. Freddie always made sure to tell them how the king had helped him. He really was becoming a right little evangelist. He had a gravity to him, though, far beyond his years, I suspect from what he had already gone through in his young life, as trials are wont to make us mature very quickly. He knew how to have fun, but also how to be serious, and the young folk warmed to him greatly. Now, our three treasure hunters had made their way through the outskirts of the county and had come to a large and golden cornfield. As they passed through, they plucked the ears and ate, as the followers of Jesus had done before them. They saw a little boy sitting under a large tree at the edge of the field and approached him. "Ho there!" called out Mr. Newhart in a friendly way, and then stopped suddenly. The boy had on his lap a large old Bible. That Bible was familiar. Indeed, as he looked closer, he recognised it as his very own Bible that he had passed on to Miss Beloved of the King all that time ago. "How came you by this Bible, sonny?" he asked, trying to keep his voice as calm as possible. The other men came up behind him. Freddie looked up and smiled as he recognised the armour the men were wearing as being from the king. "'Tis my mother's," he said happily. "She very kindly lent it to me, as I asked her so nicely. I said I wanted to go into the fields and play David the Shepherd Boy. That's my favourite game to play. And I always read some of his song, what he wrote in here, and I even make up some of my own," he said, smiling innocently up, not imagining how his comments might affect his audience. Mr. Newhart's heart leapt and he stepped back. "Your mother's?" he said in a quiet voice. So many questions were whirling through his head, as he knew this was the Bible he had given to Miss Beloved of the King, and started thinking she had got married already and begun a family and forgotten him. Seeing his thoughts, Mr. Discover-the-Truth gripped him by the shoulder. "Steady, man," he said encouragingly. "I wager there's an explanation, and not the one you are supposing. Remember, it's only been a few months since you last heard from the dear lady, and she surely would have mentioned this." "Aye," agreed Mr. Saved-by-Grace, "and a shorter time still since we heard from her mother, and though her message was urgent, knowing your heart, she assuredly would have told you." Poor Mr. Newhart held on to his brothers and nodded. "You're right, of course, but I can't shake the thought." Freddie, who had been most surprised to see Mr. Newhart's reaction, stood up. "Well," he said, brushing himself down, "it was nice to meet you, and now I must get home to Mother, as she will be wanting me for my tea soon." And he started to go, then turning around, "Would you like to come to tea? I'm sure Grandmother wouldn't mind, seeming as you belong to the King too." He smiled up at them. The three men looked at one another and then at Freddie. "Yes, please, sonny," said Mr. Newhart. "That would be very kind." He thought it best not to tell the boy exactly who they were, as he needed to be sure of what the situation with Miss Beloved of the King was first. Freddie felt very important escorting these fine-looking men in their shiny armour through the town. Boys and girls came out to have a peep, and Freddie called to them, "I'm sorry, we can't stop. I am taking these men to meet Mother," and strode along. The three hunters looked at one another and smiled. Freddie was so infectious with his joyfulness, and each man prayed that he would grow in his obvious love for the king. Miss Beloved of the King had indeed been looking out for Freddie, as he was a little late for tea and the sun had started to go down. She stepped outside, using her mother's walking stick to help her, as she really was quite frail, and she shielded her eyes from the sun as she saw Freddie marching along down the hill to their little house, and behind him the figure of three men. Miss Beloved of the King's heart gave a little flutter, and the colour rose to her cheeks. She dared not hope what her senses were telling her was true, that one of these men might be her own beloved. Now, for some reason, beknown to herself alone, Miss Poor in Spirit had not shared with her daughter Mr. Newhart's intentions. Maybe she thought it would be too much for the girl to cope with. We must accept her motives were good, at any rate. Because of this, Miss Beloved of the King only knew her own heart in the matter. She wanted to run to meet them, but her legs and heart would not let her, and so she had to wait, what felt like forever, for them to arrive at her door. What a time of greeting and welcome there was as Miss Poor in Spirit arrived at the same time and was so excited to see them too. Miss Beloved of the King introduced Freddie as her son, but did it in such a way that any thought Mr. Newhart had of losing her was completely washed away. They smiled at one another, but said nothing. Miss Poor in Spirit busied herself getting extra tea things out, and then they all sat down to eat and rejoice. The men told of their hunt, and then Freddie told them excitedly about his time on the ship. I wish we could have seen Mr. Newhart's face as he learned of the story behind how Freddie had come to call Miss Beloved of the King mother. Miss Beloved of the King saw it, and she felt very reassured of his affection. Later that evening, while Miss Beloved of the King was putting her boy to bed, Miss Poor in Spirit explained to Mr. Newhart that his letter, full of all of his declarations, had arrived the day after Miss Beloved of the King's capture. And you see, sir, I haven't yet told her of its contents, as I have been so concerned for her not to be unduly excited in her condition. Also, she paused, I confess I did not want to disappoint her if you had grown cold. You must understand, sir, that I have waited for your reply and return for many weeks. Oh, but my dear lady, the post did not get through to us until you sent the man with the gold sovereign, and even then, although we started out straight away, the road led us through many challenges. But let me assure you that the sentiments of that old letter are still as strong and fervent now as they were when I wrote them. Oh, sir, I am glad, cried Miss Poor in Spirit, for I believe your offer will be readily accepted. But what of the child? Well, he should become mine own son, of course, replied Mr. Newhart, for he had already been won by Freddie's open joyfulness and good spirit. Then you have my whole-hearted blessing, my dear, said Miss Beloved of the King's mother, and she gave him a hug. As Freddie settled down, he spoke softly to his mother. Mother? Yes, child. That man was very nice, wasn't he? They all are, Freddie. Yes, but that one that kept on looking at you, said Freddie innocently. He was extra nice, I think, because he likes you, doesn't he? I think so, Freddie. I know so, Mother, for he looks at you like you are the most beautiful person in the whole world, which you are, but I don't even look at you like that, and I love you so much. Miss Beloved of the King blushed. Well, I love you too, Freddie, dear. That man is a dear, dear friend to me. It was he who gave me my Bible. Oh, that was so kind of him. He looks kind, doesn't he, Mother? Very, said Miss Beloved of the King wistfully. Tomorrow he said he is going to take me fishing, said Freddie sleepily. Can I go, please, Mother? Miss Beloved of the King kissed him good night. Of course you can, my darling. Now sweet dreams. She came softly downstairs to find that the grown-ups had gone to sit outside in the evening sun, all except Mr. Newhart. He stood in the kitchen and looked at Miss Beloved of the King, and then held out his arms to her, and she ran into them. They both wept and confessed their love for one another and shared how they thought they might never see each other again, and how they knew they wanted to be together for the rest of their lives. Mr. Newhart got down on one knee and pulled out the ring, which you remember he had made from 2 of the treasures they had found on their journey thus far. Will you marry me, my darling? He asked, with full assurance of the answer, and a huge smile on his face. Oh, yes, please, cried Miss Beloved of the King, and flung her arms around him once more. With all the happy weeping and laughter, their friends rejoined them and congratulated them on their happy news. They could have talked late into the night, but Miss Beloved of the King looked exhausted, happy but exhausted, and so wisely they left off their discussions until the next day. But before going their separate ways, as you must remember there was only one bedroom which the women were already sharing with Freddie, and no guest room, Mr. Newhart kissed his beloved good night. That night each thanked the king for his goodness and in bringing the two together, and prayed that they would be truly blessed in their union, and that Freddie would be happy when he was told in the morning.